It is Monday, July 29th. Is it the last Monday of the month? I think that's going to wrap it up for July. Good Lord, August is already here. Can't wait for it to get cool, though, but we still got 3 months. Well, guys, today we are back for episode 2, and I really want to continue along this line of business for the blacksmith. And again, I stress, it's not just business for the blacksmith. This is business, and it's relatively universal for any crafter, whether you're a painter or you're a knife maker or a sculptor. It all kind of works the same way. And today's topic is going to be selling your work, but I'm going to drill down and at least start something very specific, because if you're starting out, how do you make money? That's the biggest thing. Everybody always thinks of that as the afterthought, and that is the absolute wrong way to go about it. So there's a couple things I want to start with, and I know I'm going to get into this a little bit further down the line, but if there's any piece of advice I can give you for selling your work, it is number one, produce. Now, a lot of us, when we get started, we see the greats that make one piece every month, every 2 months, sell it for $20,000, and that's just their charm life. That's not how it works for the rest of us. And really and truly, in my experience at this point, it's really not how it works for the rest of the artistic world either. I mean, those people do exist. People do win the lottery. But for the rest of us, there's a good chance we're going to fall into a different category. And yep, that's right. You are all in the loser bucket with me. Welcome home. But number one piece of advice, if you're looking to sell your work, make a lot of it. I cannot stress enough how important that is. So I always chuckle because you've got to be very careful of listening to, and I'm going to be a little derogatory here, to college art students. I remember in my time that if you sold a lot of your work or you did a lot of work, you were a sellout, man. You were just a loser. You sold out. You made money, which is not the attitude to have. One of the most famous artists I'd like to refer to is a guy named Van Gogh. Of course, everybody knows who Van Gogh is, and he's got several very famous paintings. But what you're seeing is the very tip top of the pyramid. Van Gogh was prolific. That man slung paint. He painted and painted because every little rich white woman wanted one of his paintings, and he made sure he had a painting to sell them, okay? That is going to be the real difference between a successful artist and somebody who's just not going to make it. Now, again, as we discussed in the previous podcast, be aware of what you define as successful. And in this case, I'm defining successful as somebody that actually makes significant money in a proper ratio to their investment. So if you spent $2 million and you make $100,000, yeah, you still suck. You did not do well on that end of it. For most of us, we're going to be half broke anyway. So if we're able to take a day of our work and convert that into $200-300 worth of product and it sells, that's a great place to start. But you've got to have it to sell. So number one, guys, if you don't have it, you can't sell it. Now, I'm going to tell you how many excuses have I heard over the day. And usually when I meet somebody that's doing the blacksmithing stuff, I very subtly, that's one of the first questions I ask is, where's your work? Where's your stuff for sale? Oh, well, I don't know. That's fine. If you're a hobbyist, that's fine. But you have no idea how many folks I have come ask me for business advice and have nothing to sell. And so right now, we're going to try this. Right now, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you are fancy yourself to be in the business of blacksmithing or knife making or art period, okay? Right now, honestly, what is the total dollar amount of your inventory? If a rich patron came to you right now and said, I want to buy everything that you have, how much is that? Okay? Think about that. Now, here's the problem. If you are under a couple of $1,000s, what are you doing? You on a crappy 2-foot by 6-foot table, you can put $3,000-$4,000 worth of stuff easily. Way more if you're making knives, right? You're telling me that you don't have enough to fill up a crappy pop-up tent table. You see how that might be a problem? So, lesson number 1, if you guys get out there before you ask any other questions, produce. 100% produce. Now, let's assume that you have product. Let's move on past that point. I'll get off that particular soapbox. Now we got to get to actually selling your work. Now, for those of us that are in the more traditional crafts on that end of it, what the deal is a lot of us, I know at least in my case, we started out in the crafter fairs. It was the local turnip festivals, what I always call them. Every town here in the South has like some sort of local weird fruit-based event, right? I'm not going to kid you. One of the first events that I ever did as a quote-unquote professional was in Warwick, Georgia, and that was the Warwick Grits Festival. Now, Warwick is not even a speed bump in the road. It is a tiny little town, but I've got to tell you about this. Okay, we're going to have to take a slight detour because the highlight of the Warwick Grits Festival is they pull in like a big trailer for a stage, right? And they have all the kids and then some adults get up there, and they have this big galvanized like watering trough. It's a sizable watering trough like for livestock, and they have a scale like one of the big old cotton scales beside it. Okay, so here's what happens: it's a competition. So they weigh you very specifically first, and then they fill this trough with hot grits, like gallons, like the entire tub is filled with hot grits. I don't think there's any butter, right? And what you do is you are attempting to see how many grits you can get to stick to you, right? So they weigh you, you jump in, you roll around in the grits, and they weigh you again. And whoever had the most grits that stuck to them wins the prize. I kid you not, that was my first show. Okay, a lot of you are going to start on the turnip circuit. Now, here's the thing. I had a small folding table. Now, this is like pre-Costco Sam's days of the nice plastic ones. I had the big old manly folding tables that, had the fake wood on top of it. They're made out of like the world's worst particle board, but they weighed like 300 pounds, right? And I had it filled with trinkets. I had S-hooks and steak flippers and things like that. And I think I ended up doing a couple of $100. It wasn't that terrible for that size of festival, right? But again, the biggest trick is I had a lot of product out and I had it at the right price range. Most of you guys are going to start at your local festival. You're going to set up your knife booth or whatever else, and you're going to try to make a couple bucks. So we're going to talk about that real quick, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview when you're dealing with festivals on that end of it, because it's important to know how to approach them, and we need to do a little bit of math. And I'm going to quote from the guy that taught me, J. Penfield Riekert, who had a very, very good view on this. Numbers are king. Now, I was willfully ignorant of numbers for a long time, and it did not serve me well. Regardless of what the numbers are, you need to know them, whether you act on them or not. So, real quick, this could really get into a long video. I think I'm already 9 minutes in. So, this is how you deal with a show. This is how you get your numbers. So, how much does it cost to get into the show? Your average turnip festival will usually be between $50, $150, $200. That's your price of entrance, okay? You need to figure out your gas and travel there. You need to figure out your accommodations, right? And if you have conned somebody into actually setting the table with you, you need to figure out what you would pay them hourly, even if you don't, and that needs to be the number that you have. So most of the time when you go to an average size show, the normal person is usually going to spend about $500 to get to a show and get back, okay? Let's just say that's your base number, okay? $500 is what the show is going to cost you. So how do you figure out how much stock that you need to sell? Okay, Jay had what we call the 4-to-1 rule. That meant that for every $4 of product in both quantity and variety that you had on the table, at a good show, you should expect to sell $1 worth. Okay? Now watch this. This is pretty wild. So that means if we have a good show, we're going to sell 25% with what's on the table. If we need to break even at $500, that means that we need $2,000 worth of product on the table to expect to break even at a good show. Now, that's not a bad show. At a good show, you expect to break even if you have $2,000 worth of stock on your table. So let's say that we want to cover our expenses and make $500 for that weekend. Now that total number is $1,000. That means that for that weekend, you need $4,000 worth of stock on your table. Now, to make matters worse, get this. So just because that you're selling something for $20 doesn't mean you're making $20, because your profit margin is probably going to be half of that. So you guys see where we're going at? So if you sell $4,000 worth of stuff, well, that's not your profit margin. That's your gross sales. So let's just say reasonably, if you wanted to cover your costs and make $500, it's not an unreasonable thing to put $6,000 worth of stock on your table. Now, if you were anything like me, those numbers would take your breath. You're going, hey, man, I do this as a hobby. What's all this 1,000 crap that you're spewing? I did not like those numbers either, and I purposely ignored them at my peril. If you want to know how to sell stuff, you've got to produce stuff. Now, here's the great news. Here's the great news. You can make a bunch of crap, and some of it will sell, and to the annoyance of so many of us professionals. There's a lot of guys out there, and this especially happened after Forge and Fire, right? There's a lot of us out there that are knowledgeable, capable at like teaching classes, right? Oh, this is great. You guys are going to love this. Teaching classes. So even though I've got all this experience, I know I'm a good teacher, I'm always a little hesitant about how I charge for my classes, because I'm like, man, is that reasonable? Really? But then I noticed that there were complete idiots teaching classes for twice what I would have asked. Man, let me tell you. There was one instance of a fella that was actually teaching a knife making class out of the most crappy storage facility. I don't even know who the fellow was. I didn't know anything about him, still don't. But I've had some of his students, and it was just terrible, and these people paid through the nose. So here's the problem. And the point of all this is that even if you think it's crappy, put it out there. There will be somebody who will buy it. If you don't put it out there because, it's too crappy, well, you're not going to sell it, and you're not going to eat, and therefore you're not going to have a chance to make something a little bit better. Get out there, put your work on the table, see who will buy it. Sometimes people will just buy it to support you. Pay them back by becoming better. But pay attention to these numbers. If you're going to be honest about getting into business and making the money, you need to know those numbers. Now, this end of this year, we're going back to Thomasville Victorian Christmas, which is down, of course, in Thomasville, Georgia, which is a beautiful, fantastic event. I think this is like our ninth year. Good God, I'm getting old. 9th year of doing it. And this will probably be the first year that we ever take a sell tent. And here's the deal. For those of you that have seen me out demonstrating in the field, you'll notice that my sell tent is conspicuously absent. And let me tell you why. Because you're going to find out that you can do either a good demonstration or you can run a good tent. You cannot do both without a substantial crew. Now, again, you can redneck the hell out of it and, and have, the sister over there smoking a cigarette with the kids and still sell something. It happens all the time at the flea market. But if you're going to do a good job of moving product and looking like a semi-professional, you're going to have somebody there that's dedicated to it and minding it. And that's why when we go do our shows as demonstrators, I was like, nope, we are here to demonstrate. And we are paid performers at that point. So I am on the clock. My job is to perform and engage the crowd, not sell stuff. Now, it's going to be a little different in Thomasville. A lot of the times people ask us to bring the sale tent because we have some nice stuff. But that now I'm going to be hauling, we're going to have a small tent. We're probably going to have 2 tables, but that still means that I need to have roughly about 15 grand worth of stock hanging around to have a properly fleshed out tent. And this is just for a small 2-day event, right? So that's the conundrum. Now, whether or not I take that much, well, that remains to be seen. But you need to know these numbers. You need to know where the benchmark is, because if you get out there and you have $75 worth of stock on your table and you complain that you sold a S-hook and made $5, well, that's on you. This is a numbers game, and I keep going back to this, guys. Blacksmithing in this form is a business. And just take blacksmithing right out of it. If you're selling snow cones, you don't go out there and have 3 snow cones for sale and then wonder why nobody bought one, right? You have a variety. Try this out, just to kind of give you an idea of how much business you need to know. The next time you go into your local gas station, now this is a retail thing. This is a very important deal. It's what they call price per square foot. So basically what a lot of stores do is they take the total square footage of the sales floor. They add up all the retail value of the goods on there, and they come up with a per square foot price. So try this. When you go into the gas station next, look at everything that's in there for sale. Try to do a little bit of quick math and figure out exactly, if somebody came in and said, I want to buy everything in this small convenience store, what would that price be, right? And once you've got that number, what's the square footage? What is that number, right? And then compare that to your tent. If you've got a 10 by 10 tent, that means you got 100 square foot. How much stock per square foot? What's that dollar value? And guys, these are figuring numbers, but they tell you something about the potential that your business or your tent has to make money. If you don't have that product, then you're not going anywhere. So again, for all these great formulas, they only work if you have product. So circling back to the original end of things, guys, produce. Now, not only is that going to give you something to sell, but that also means that you are going to be practicing. If you want to know what makes you a better blacksmith, a class is just a starting point. It is just a springboard. It is the hours that you spend on top of the anvil that makes you proficient in what you do. And you need to do it, because if you want to make the money, you've got to be proficient. If you want to be proficient, you got to spend the time. That's how the business works. So guys, that's going to wrap it up. I have run my mouth for almost another 20 minutes. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming by. Now, a couple of things real quick. Again, if you guys have a particular topic or a particular question, please leave them in the comments down below. I am going to run out of topics pretty quick on that end of it. So give me something to run my mouth about, and I'll be glad to do it. Outside of that, guys, thank you so much for hanging around. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week.